Well, this is always a really satisfying part of media democracy, which is the plenary, where some of the themes and discussions and ideas that have come up over the course of a very exciting day get remixed and chatted about. And we're really honored to have a fantastic panel to help us along with this discussion, to provoke us in our thinking yet again. My name is Stuart Points, and I'm a professor in the School of Communication at SFU. I'm also part of the organizing group that has put this day together, which at this stage we're generally both exhilarated and exhausted, and I'd say that's a fairly accurate description. I want to thank again some of the people who have made this event possible. Dr. Kathy Cross, who's been resilient, remarkable, and driving and making this happen, and we say thank you, honey. And I also want to thank Josh Tabish and Kavya Joseph, both of whom have been incredibly dedicated people in putting their time into this event. Absolutely. I also want to say a word of great thanks and respect for Tyler Morgenstern, who literally within 24 hours turned around and put together a really fantastic opening talk under very difficult circumstances. So and what a fine person who, as I said earlier, is going to change our thinking down the way. And that's a fantastic person to have in the room. We have three other fantastic people on our panel. And they are each going to take on the issue of media democracy and some of the really crystallizing concerns that are at the center of building a media democracy movement today. To my immediate left is Michael Vaughan, who many of you know is a lawyer and policy director of the BC Civil Liberties Association. Some of you will have been in the panel with her that just preceded. Michael will conclude our panel discussion. Beside Michael is Riley Yao. Riley is the managing director of openmedia.ca, and we're really honored to have Riley with us. And she'll be talking about the Bell Astral decision and open media's role in that, which is a real, represents a real impact that their organization is making in the public domain and public policy. And to the far left is Derek O'Keefe, who's the editor of rabble.ca. Many of you will know Derek, many of you will know rabble.ca. Derek will be going second today. But to begin, we welcome Riley Yao to the stage from openmedia.ca.
Can I stay here? Yeah, thanks. Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay, good. So I want to talk to you guys today about change in the media sphere and how changes that seem impossible can actually happen. At openmedia.ca, as many of you probably know, we focus on safeguarding the possibilities of the open internet. And we believe that the internet creates new possibilities for politics, for arts and culture, for global connection. And so people need to be empowered to decide how it evolves. In Canada, what that means is engaging a lot with the CRTC, Canada's Media and Internet Authority, or an unelected body of people appointed by the Prime Minister in a pretty much secret process with no clear qualifications, many of whom used to work for the big telecom companies that they are now supposed to govern. Getting people to engage with the CRTC and try to influence its decisions has felt daunting, if not impossible, to those of us at Open Media in the past, because people either don't know what the CRTC is or they hate it. They really, really hate it. So we tried last year to put the chief of the CRTC in a Superman cape and ask him to be a hero, and people were like offended for Superman that we were making this comparison. So it's complicated because at Open Media, we sort of love-hate the CRTC. I mean, we see that there are huge problems with it, and that's why we do the work that we do. But we also believe that there has to be a governing body with a mandate to make decisions about the internet in the public interest, rather than just letting the big telecom companies that control 94% of internet service basically do whatever they want. So last year, we had this huge, unprecedented success that seemed quite impossible at the time, when over 500,000 people sent messages to the CRTC and to the government as part of our Stop the Meter campaign. These people were opposing a decision by the CRTC that would have put a pay meter on all internet access in Canada and would have destroyed the independent internet service providers who create some accountability for big telecom. And we won. Because of the 500,000 petition signers and the firestorm of media that was created by that, the CRTC actually reversed that decision. So this was a huge and totally inspiring change at a governing body that had, up till then, pretty much taken its marching orders from big telecom. But something also happened during the CRTC's hearing about Stop the Meter that was really disturbing to me as someone who cares about the future of the internet in Canada. The vice chair of the CRTC, Tom Pentafuntas, basically went after our executive director, Steve Anderson, in the hearing in a way that showed he had this very troubling attitude towards the internet in Canada. He asked Steve, first of all, was it not true that open media was just as self-serving as big telecom? And second, he said that he didn't understand what was undemocratic about allowing a few companies to control internet access. Now, Steve responded very well and very clearly by saying that our interest in making the internet more open is a public interest and one that we have collectively as a country, and therefore very different from a narrow commercial interest in making the most profit possible. But the fact that you had the vice chairman of the CRTC, whose bio says that he has a strong interest in the Canadian democratic process, suggesting first that telecom corporations are only as self-serving as a public interest organization with over 500,000 supporters, and then suggesting that he can't understand the connection between corporate control of the internet and democracy, was a very scary sign of how far we still had to go with the CRTC, and really how far we have to go with democracy. So, but the thing is, the CRTC does have reasons to be confused. It has a mandate to serve the public interest, but then in 2006, the government also issued a directive saying that it must rely on market forces to the maximum extent feasible. I don't think figuring out how to serve the public interest in that context is always easy. Well, that's something I'll talk more about later. So we have a new chief commissioner now, Jean-Pierre Blaise, and his first decision was a very big one. Bell, which is the biggest of the big telecom companies, wanted to buy Astral Media, which would have given Bell control of over a third of English television in Canada. I love having a soundtrack, but I'll wait for it to be over. Thank you. So Bell wanted to buy Astral Media. This would have also threatened open internet service in Canada because Bell could then say to its small competitors, for example, you won't be able to provide HBO Canada because we own it, so you won't be able to compete with us. So we were extremely concerned about this decision, and we launched the Stop the Takeover campaign to oppose it, led by our very own Lindsay Pinto. So we planned for a few different scenarios at this hearing where they were going to take over Astral, but honestly, we didn't really plan super seriously for the CRTC to completely stop the takeover and just say no to Bell. Even despite the fact that we'd seen this great reversal with Stop the Meter, still, the CRTC has this history of really trying to please Bell, and it just seemed unlikely that they would completely reverse that. This was even though we had noticed this huge change in the rhetoric at the CRTC, with the new Chief Blaise actually closing the hearing by saying, in particular, I would like to thank individual Canadians who took the time to participate in our proceedings. The Commission regulates in the public interest, and that is pretty difficult to do without the public. That's okay. Yeah. Bell knows what's up. They're clever and aggressive. Okay, so when the CRTC did finally completely reject Bell's takeover bid, we were totally stunned. And the media called it stunning, because it was. The Commission also explicitly said that it had made this decision because it thought the takeover was not in the public interest. So we're actually seeing this new reorientation towards the public interest at the body that can make decisions about the internet, and this is a massive, massive change. For anyone here who has participated in our campaigns, you should be incredibly proud. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you. Chief Commissioner Blaise then followed up on this decision by making a totally unprecedented speech, where he said that the CRTC had lost the trust of Canadians. So he said, I think it was daunting for individual Canadians to participate in our proceedings. We got distant, and I want to get reacquainted. We can do better, and we will do better, to earn their trust every day, in every action, and in every decision. What he's saying here is something that should be totally uncontroversial, but actually represents a massive change in thinking by government. You can't actually serve the public interest or know what it is unless you're really empowering people to participate. So what we've learned from this is that change happens when people are empowered and involved. When we pay attention to decisions that are being made about media and we come together en masse using these online tools, even distant institutions will feel the pressure to act in the public interest. And there were some other things that Blaise said during the hearing that I think were maybe even more interesting than what he said about the public interest. So he said, "It's true we have put a refocused emphasis on consumers. The Commission always has the interests of consumers at heart. But I think we are also thinking about citizens and creators, and probably we may think that maybe this is more of a citizenship issue than a consumer issue." He also said, "We've talked a lot about Canadian consumers, but sometimes Canadians also wear a citizenship hat. One of the underlying rationales for the Diversity of Voices framework is that Canadian citizens have access to news and information that allows them to participate in local, regional, provincial, national issues, for instance, political events, and so forth." So the way the Globe and Mail, which is 15% owned by Bell, has been framing Blaise is as this kind of defender of consumers and someone who's going to address market failures and create healthy competition. But I'm actually hopeful that because of all your hard work actively participating in what the CRTC does, they're going to go beyond this more limited framework. If we stay engaged and aware, we can make a very, very big change happen. The recognition that the public interest in democratizing media is not about empowering people simply in terms of their dollars, but empowering them in terms of their rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart and Riley, for that talk, and thanks again. Let's have another round for the work of Open Media, and one of the few groups to push Harper back and win one thing. So it's been another great weekend, and it's always an honor to be part of Media Democracy Day. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 11 years that Media Democracy Day has been going here. 12 years, sorry. 11 years since the first one, 2001. But this is the 12th. I think it's appropriate that Media Democracy Day started in the year that the so-called War on Terror started, because this last decade and a bit has really been marked by a media landscape that has been very much related to the aggressive wars and the rise of Islamophobia and other attacks on civil liberties that we've seen throughout our societies. So in the last decade, more than ever, we need diverse voices in the media, and we need to challenge the corporate agenda. So right there, I wanted to start off by acknowledging maybe the person I consider North America's most important media democracy activist, and that's Bradley Manning, who, as we all know, is imprisoned, has been essentially tortured and confined to extremely abusive detention, indefinite detention, for the crime, allegedly, of leaking information that confirmed what we know, that the war in Iraq has been a terrible crime, both against the people of Iraq and also, in a way, against the many soldiers that have been sent to die there. And Bradley Manning, who suffered a lot of abuse within the military and also growing up, and decided he had seen enough abuse by the United States in Iraq and chose to, as we say, allegedly chose to release hundreds of thousands of classified or not so classified U.S. cables that helped confirm the facts of the war in Iraq. So we think about Bradley Manning, we think about Eugene Debs' quote from a century ago when he said, "As long as there is a soul in prison, I am not free." And as long as any soul is imprisoned for their ideas, I think none of us is really free. I've done an unusual thing here. I've written down some of my talk because we were told something like 7 minutes. So to keep it very short, I want to write down some of my thoughts because I deal with the Harper government, and when I get talking about the Harper government and media, I tend to go on. So forgive me if I do read some of my remarks. Harper's government is both unbearable to live under and very dangerous. And the way that Harper operates makes me think of a line from Orwell's 1984, and that is, "He who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past." Well, Harper is very much using his control of the present to recreate the Canadian past in his image. So we have his $40 million extravaganza promoting his version of the War of 1812. And in Harper's version of the War of 1812, Tecumseh was a Canadian patriot who nodded approvingly to the British. You know those TV ads? Has everyone seen those TV ads where the indigenous person is sort of nodding as the British fire their guns at the Americans? And this is the narrative of First Nations and British uniting to save Canada. Well, first of all, Canada didn't exist. And second of all, Tecumseh and the First Nations had made a tactical alliance with the British because they were fighting a war, an existential war against the American Empire or the American state, which was trying to commit genocide against their people. So Tecumseh was actually fighting for a First Nations confederacy, for an independent indigenous state in North America, or what we would now call a state. And this was broken and defeated and betrayed ultimately by the British after Tecumseh died. So all of that history is lost in Harper's version. So it makes me very uncomfortable when the Museum of Civilization, which currently showcases international culture and history, has been turned into the museum, what's the new name they've given it? The Museum of Canadian History. But I worry that this will become the Museum of Harper's History. They've already said that it will focus on the military and the monarchy. So we can imagine Harper's stamp going on to that great museum in Ottawa, or just across the river from the Parliament in Ottawa. The whole premise of Harper's government, in terms of the way it communicates with the general public at present, when it's not giving you their propaganda version of history, their whole premise is that people are and will remain uninformed. And even if they are informed, they will fail to act, or they'll act only on their fears and not on their intellect and their hearts and mind. On this premise, Harper acts and communicates with unrelenting cynicism. Every utterance, every sports or military-related tweet, I'm sure we've all seen some of those from Harper, every press release, every tightly controlled media conference or photo op aims to convey a specific message to a specific targeted voter. If you're not one of those specific targeted voters, Harper does not care about you, and he hopes and assumes that you don't care about his government. He wants to reduce the field of citizenship. In fact, Harper aims to reduce the number of citizens. He wants to have a Canada where there's more of a temporary migrant labor force that can be brutally exploited and that doesn't participate in political life and can't vote. And those citizens that can vote, if you're not one of his targeted voters that he thinks he can pull in, he wants to suppress your vote. He wants you going to the wrong polling station, or he wants you to drop out of political life altogether. In fact, if you look at the model that Harper is aiming for, you really do have to think of the Gulf petrostates, where you have an overwhelming migrant workforce with no citizenship rights at all, and an economy and a political life completely undemocratic, of course, in the Gulf states. Harper's got a long way to go yet for that, but he's definitely wants to head in that direction, and an economy and just general life dictated by oil and by petro-politics. But at this point, we can talk about where Harper has been pushed back, in part because of media democracy and great media activism by different campaigners. And that is on the Enbridge pipeline, and more generally on Kinder Morgan and the tar sands pipelines altogether. It's worth remembering right now that a year ago, or less than a year ago, Joe Oliver, Natural Resources Minister, was sending off letters and speaking to the media about how anyone who opposed those pipelines was a radical and a foreign-funded extremist. Well, in less than a year, because of dedicated environmental activists, First Nations taking the lead, and because of a lot of really creative use of the media and use of social media, everybody saw it during the Defend Our Coast actions last month, right? The incredible social media footprint that went into building those actions. Because of all that, Harper now doesn't even want to talk about the Enbridge pipeline, and he's pulled back altogether from communicating on it. So we have, in a way, through the use of media and through effective and creative activism, been able to push Harper back. And I think media democracy is essential to do that. And we won't ultimately be able to stop Harper and his oligopoly friends if we don't put an end to the media oligopoly in this country once and for all. So media democracy is essential to defeating Harper's agenda and to challenging the systems that Harper serves, because it's not just about one guy, however much we all dislike him. the systems he serves I'm talking about here are capitalism, imperialism, patriarchy, and yes, also colonialism. Although in Harper's history, as he once said at a G20 press conference, Canada has no history of colonialism. That's an actual quote from our Prime Minister. So we do need to talk about these things. With Harper attempting to rewrite our history and imposing this virtual reality, very cynical virtual reality where he assumes we're not paying attention, we have to clearly call things by their actual names. And we don't have that in our current media setup. Even our public broadcaster, right? The most high-profile political discussion program in Canada is the CBC At Issue Panel. Canada. Well, what is the CBC At Issue Panel? It's 4 people, white, middle class, comfortable, actually all from central Canada, agreeing with each other. That's what it is. It's not a debate program. And, oh, sorry, Peter Mansbridge is there too, another one. So there's 5 of them, all on the center right, all agreeing with each other. And every time a big protest movement or something like Occupy happens, telling the Canadian public that there's nothing to see, just move along, things will take care of themselves. So you can't have you can't have media democracy if you have a public broadcaster that thinks that the political spectrum goes from Andrew Coyne in the center right to like Don Cherry on the loony right. This is the way they treat the actual like field of respectable discussion. So we have to break through this by naming things by their names and by having an actual left in the media. And one place this happened was in Quebec. We all now know the name Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois because he became a very visible spokesperson, including in the mainstream media in Quebec during the student strike. And the students there, they didn't water down their message. They used the media as a tribune and just kept hammering away until the mainstream media reported what they were saying. And Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois did us all a favor last weekend. He spoke at the Power Shift conference on a slightly different topic. He was speaking about climate justice. How many people heard about or were at Power Shift in Ottawa? Riley, you were there? Oh, right on. And a few others. So this is a convergence of young climate justice activists, and I really wish I was there because very, very inspiring, and it's a sad thing that none of it ended up on CBC The National as far as I saw, because there were incredibly inspiring speeches. But in Nadeau-Dubois' speech, he made a very startling assertion. He said, all these individual actions we do to deal with the environmental crisis are irrelevant if we do not challenge the system. And he named the system as capitalism, and he said we either get rid of capitalism or capitalism gets rid of us. That is, it's a threat to the human species' continued existence and a threat to millions of other species in the world. And when I talk to people about this speech, and when we talk in these clear terms, it does sound a little crazy in the sense that we never hear these things debated and discussed. We don't turn on the TV and hear these things discussed. So I thank Gabrielle for making this clear point, but we need so many more voices making these clear points, and that's why we need media democracy. Because I would argue that the crazy thing is that we're not having this debate all the time. We have the Arctic melting to the lowest ice coverage in recorded history, in modern history. We have Greenland melting at record rates. We have the hottest year in the hottest decade, droughts, Superstorm Sandy, just the latest of new latitudes having tropical storms and hurricanes. Clear evidence that extreme weather is happening because of ocean warming and climate change. So the really crazy thing is that we're not discussing getting rid of capitalism all the time on every channel with voices right across the spectrum. So we're really impoverished by this lack of media democracy. As it is, we barely have any voices arguing for serious reform of the economic system of capitalism, let alone getting rid of it. So media democracy is essential if we're going to deal with the big questions of our time. And not to compare his plight to Bradley Manning, but to come back and wrap it up, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois was actually found guilty of contempt of court a couple of days ago by a Quebec judge who happened to be connected to the Liberal Party of Quebec. And he was found in contempt of court because during the student strike, he argued in defense of students holding picket lines in support of their strike, even after a judge had passed an injunction against picketing. And Gabriel, supposedly had argued that picket lines were legitimate. So for arguing that picket lines were legitimate, this 21-year-old kid is now facing up to a year in prison. And so we come back to this idea of the system not only does it want to prevent our voices in the mainstream media, but then it actually wants to imprison those who are effective or those who seriously threaten the system. But you cannot imprison an idea and you cannot kill an idea. And as the Occupy movement said when it was being evicted from all its camps in New York, Vancouver, and everywhere else, you cannot evict an idea whose time has come. I would say media democracy's time has come more than ever, and thanks to technology, we do have openings for bringing it to fruition more than ever. We must change who controls the present, or we risk having no future at all, let alone a future worth imagining. This might seem too scary to contemplate. What's truly frightening is that our current media landscape is barely capable of debating the real issues of our time. It's incapable of giving us a true picture of our past and our present, and as I said, it's not interested in anyone imagining a different kind of future. So in closing, Rabble.ca, where I work, is honored and hopes to continue to work with media democracy, and we hope to continue to try to make media democracy a reality year-round and find different ways for independent media organizations, groups, and publications to work together year-round. We have to set aside old differences. We have to get past the narcissism of tiny differences, and we need to find new ways to unite because the problems we're facing are serious. Our enemies, the concentrated media, as I say, the loony right of Sun TV, but also just the dominant media of this country. They're serious opponents and they're serious enemies for what we really have to do. So we have to find ways to all work together for media democracy. So I hope we leave this weekend all leaving a little more capable of imagining a better future and imagining a truly flourishing media democracy. Thank you very much.
Get the water. Okay. So, you know that when you're on the closing plenary, you have a job, and your job is to help inspire people to answer the question, what to do? What do we do? What do we do? And I always find myself kind of awkwardly situated in these circumstances because I'm a privacy advocate. I spend my life professionally depressed, right? I'm not often asked to rouse people. And I was thinking that, coming from the Civil Liberties Association, you're probably expecting me to talk about rights or something along those lines. I'm taking a different tact. I'm actually going to build on some things that Derek said, but from a kind of a different direction. And I'm making a pitch here, and I'll explain what I mean by my pitch. In terms of what we need to do that will be less obvious, is that we need to cherish, protect, and practice the long form. Everything I'm going to say on this subject, Edward Said said better, longer, and more stylishly in Humanism and Democratic Criticism. But building on that, I agree with Edward Said that what is happening now, by which I'm referring to the unprecedented media concentration, the bombardment with pre-packaged and reified representations of the world, the short telegraphic form that is everywhere dominant in headlines, sound bites, slogans, and brands. In other words, the great reductive and vulgarizing thought patterns of our time are nothing less than an assault on thought itself. To say nothing of democracy, equality, the environment, and some other things that we've already referenced here. The resistance to this, in terms of communication, in terms of media democracy, is critique. That is being receptive and reading to relentlessly clarify and unpack those ubiquitous political and commercial messagings designed to persuade or to lull into submission rather than stimulate thought and engage the intellect. The resistance to this is what I call the long form. Longer communications, longer periods of reflection, depth and specificity. Specificity, I'm deciding, in my own mind, is one of the most important forms of humility. It's the grounding in individual particularity that is the bracing antidote to the arrogance of sweeping generalizations that so often pass for political argument in this and other countries. It's a resistance to the flattened out and one-dimensional dominant communications, so prevalent and so prevailing in modes of vapid slogans that we hear in the political tactic that I like to refer to as wielding the mighty sword of vagueness, right? Specificity is the antidote to that. It is protecting against the disappearance of complexity, and has already been referenced, the disappearance of our past. It is explaining to those who have not had the benefit of knowing the reference why it is that when tens of thousands of Germans take to the streets in protest against online spying bills, they wear T-shirts that say Stasi 2.0. Now, I find it chilling in Canada that, having mentioned this reference several times, no one has ever asked me what 2.0 means. Some people have asked me what the Stasi means. In building resistance through the long form, it's taking the time and the care to unpack and explore and explain and examine in depth. My slogan, if you will, for the new media decade would be, depth is the new black. In depth, by what I mean, when I say that, is not to be confused with layered mystification. Expertise in our prevailing mode is often used as a distancing device, another means of obfuscation, or a justification for rule by technocratic oligarchs. In a democratic, humanistic depth, there is care and rigor and a cultivation of complex understandings attached to a concreteness that allows us to explain this to our neighbors in the dog park. Right? The long form takes the time and has the humility, takes reading and sustained focus, because these are effectively the tools to resist the undermining of our democratic discourse through sloganeering. So what I'm suggesting here is not an anti-tweet manifesto. I am suggesting, is there any more water? Derek, can I come?
Yeah.
Thanks. Oh, good. Thank you. What I'm suggesting, is the resistance to vapid sloganeering is not more sloganeering. We have to protect the long form, which is, of course, time intensive and, frankly, without effective shortcuts. Nevertheless, without its complexity and the intellectual honesty that I'm implying, we can never hope to arm ourselves against mere ideology. Not, of course, that you need to present a detailed theory of justice in order to go to war with injustice. But you do need a critique and an understanding of how power is constellated and concentrated in order to derive genuine alternatives, democratic alternatives. This is all to say, or rather it's not to say, that there is of course no place for the short and the sassy. There's most definitely a place for the fun and fast. But I suggest that our big work, our main work, and our critical work is in the long form, and that nobody other than the resistance is going to protect it. So that's my rallying cry. Higher word counts. Thanks kindly.
Okay, thank you to Michael and to Riley and to Derek. We have about 8 minutes left, and then the library will quickly sweep us out of here because they need this room, and there are some limits on our time. However, we do have a few minutes. So what that really means is the floor is open for questions, but, if I may say, please may I ask that you use this opportunity to ask questions rather than to make statements, because it's important that people have an opportunity. So I'm also going to encourage you to speak for no more than 45 seconds so that there's a chance to have a response. Okay?
Thank you. I'll speak quickly. My question is, in the open media, is there any role for prominent figures like Tommy Douglas, who have worked on promoting Medicare, and other leaders, so that the youngsters can look at their experience of how they struggle, read about them? Because I am promoting, we are working on Canadian Grandparents' Day as on Tommy Douglas' birthday, which is 20th, and people can know about it because all grandparents benefited. So there is a question of, and also I'm promoting the real Spice Girls, the Nobel Prize winners who are women, and people don't know them, so it's a good idea to know, and I hope there is a way where some of these heroes can be put in the open media to show the youngsters, especially those who are under 20, instead of just reading about dragons and spiders, they could read about our freedom fighters. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just be quick so other people can ask questions. But I mean, we definitely look at ways that we can be inspired by former generations of activists. I was just working on a project called Reimagine CBC and reading back on the work that Graham Spry did. There definitely are pioneers that we look at. So yeah, I'd encourage you in the work that you're doing.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be all for a referendum to abolish the monarchy and to get rid of the Queen of England as our head of state. That's my personal opinion. It's striking that we almost never debate this or talk about it. So I mean, I think, didn't Sven Robinson at one point try to get the word God out of the oath that parliamentarians have to take or something? And again, like, the full weight of the corporate media comes down on people even for raising these suggestions. So I think Harper bringing it back is just part of his creation of additional authority figures and just his Anglo-Saxonization of Canada. Even if in the present we become a more diverse country, he wants the image and that image to inform the present. So that's why he's renaming the Army and Navy after putting the Royal back in. They put the Queen back up in all the photo of the Queen is back in all the embassies, and now Canada and Britain are even going to be sharing a number of foreign embassies. So it's an odd thing, but I think it's just another type of authority figure and traditionalist conservative thing that he can push. Yeah. I'm sure there'll be a whole wing for the monarchy in the new museum in Ottawa that after Harper puts the pressure on the bureaucrats or whatever.
Okay, yeah. Can hear, and that will, I think, take our... Riley, would you mind repeating the question? I'm not sure that everybody heard that.
What are some of the measures that we need to take towards our government to get them to engage with the issues that we're talking about, particularly in the face of corporate media? Just to have that right? Even through the mainstream media, which doesn't have the same silos that other forms of media have, right? Well, my obvious answer, I'm sure no one's going to be surprised for me to say it, is to participate in open media's campaigns. I mean, when we get 500,000 people together to do something, it's incredibly powerful. And you can go to openmedia.ca and find out what kinds of campaigns we're working on. And it can be as simple as signing a petition or as complex as helping us make an online video, writing a letter to the editor, doing graphic design, doing web development work, helping us build tools. There's tons and tons of ways for you to get involved in the campaigns that we do. And on the specific issue of media, we've also just run a campaign called Reimagine CBC that's been about pushing the CBC to do some of the in-depth kind of reporting that Michael Vaughan is talking about. Was the first priority that came out of this public process that we did. And now we're looking to push them to take our recommendations seriously. So there's lots of room in the open media world for you to get involved in the things that you care about.
Can I just add something to that, which is a point that came out last year at last year's MDD, which I thought was just a remarkably simple and obvious but significant strategy, which was Sut Jolly, Dr. Sut Jolly, who's one of our keynotes last year. He commented that it's really important for those who are in the media democracy movement to actually, I'm paraphrasing him here, but put your money where your mouth is. And what he really meant was spend at least as much time or something close to as much time with and on alternative media as we do on mainstream media. We talk a great deal about the need to generate and build a media democracy movement. And what Sut noted last year is that if we really focus on how do we allocate our time, how do we allocate our resources, and to be conscious of the need to actually put resources into the alternative media communities. Open Media is one example. There are 30 others upstairs that are doing work in a number of different fields. And it seems to me that's a really important call to arms to nurture the long form, or what Raymond Williams used to call the long revolution, is to actually build formative organizations and institutions through our own contributions, because that actually builds those resources that make a kind of gathering force of power come to life. Our last question?
Well, I think I don't know if it's Ireland or Scotland that's right now ousting the Queen. But, New Zealand ousted nuclear weapons. And sort of, the Queen seems to be more on the side of nuclear weapons than on democracy around the world. But my question is, the boy, that 20-year-old French-Canadian boy that changed history, what was the actual criminal charge that they used to put him behind bars?
Okay. The question is just what was the actual charge against Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois? He's not behind bars yet. He has sentencing this week. There's a website you can go to find out details of his case. It's called Appel à Tout. APPELATOUS.org. So just look up Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, and the charge is contempt of court. And I don't know all the legal system in Quebec or how it works, but it was the charge was originally it was a complaint by another student, a pro-tuition hike student who didn't like Gabriel and his organization. So said, well, look, he's showing contempt of court because he's saying picket lines are legitimate even after a judge has put an injunction against picket lines. But it has big ramifications, just like Quebec's Law 78 had big ramifications for everyone across the country. And that's why people around the world and across the country opposed Law 78. When any one person is found in contempt of court for advocating a really basic protest tactic of a strike picket line, it has a chilling effect on labor leaders across the country. And I saw when the verdict came out, Dave Coles, who's the president of CEP, the Communication, Energy, and Paper Workers Union, he said, well, this is a threat to every trade union leader who's ever advocated a strike. And sometimes strikes have to be illegal because governments pass injunctions or anti-strike legislation. And that doesn't mean they're not legitimate. With the teacher strike in 2005 was technically illegal, but it gained widespread public support, or maybe that's why it gained public support, because they were defying the Liberal government here in BC. So it's important for media to also have the guts to run op-eds that would be considered civil disobedience or encouraging civil disobedience or breaking of unjust laws. That's a long answer to your question, but it's contempt of court that he's charged with.
Well, my suggestion, just popping out
Okay.
of my head,
Yeah.
is that we all go home and work on a worldwide campaign
for sure. Yeah, we should all campaign to get Gabriel or keep him out of jail. Yeah, sure.
Okay, I want to thank Derek and Riley and Michael. I also want to thank the rest of our panelists and contributors who have been part of a very, very exciting day. It's been a remarkably satisfying experience in so many ways. Thank you all for coming on a dreary Saturday afternoon. It's wonderful to see this group of people, so many young people in the room. I look for, one other thing, continue to look for events for Media Democracy. The Media Democracy program has expanded. We have a speaker series. November 30th, David Barsminian will be speaking in Vancouver. He is an advocate on media concentration and democracy. There will be other events coming in the new year as well, so keep your eye open for those sorts of things. And remain involved, get involved, be involved. Thank you so much.